question is Catherine Delahunty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's always interesting to reflect on wealthy people's understanding of poverty. And there's a tone which I think possibly comes from greed dependency. We hear a lot about benefit dependency, but we don't acknowledge greed dependency in our country. It's quite a problem. And we will be supporting the bill to first reading to select committee because of the $25, because we can't deprive people of that. But it's still a misunderstanding of the issue when the scale of the problem is so much greater than the supposed plan, the supposed solution. And so I'd rather not talk about mullets or anything today. I'd like to talk about the kids, because today is in some ways a victory for the amazing group effort out there in the community to make child poverty such an important issue that the government was unable to deny it. And I'd like to pay tribute to people like Child Poverty Action, Every Child Counts, New Zealand Council of Social Services, UNICEF, and many more, and the Green Party for our leadership through Matiria Ture's unfailing, absolutely determined commitment to make child poverty an issue that the government in this budget could not afford to ignore because the focus groups told them they couldn't afford it. So before we get all warm-hearted about the caring government, let's just acknowledge that this campaign has achieved a small step. And the step that's been achieved, Mr. Speaker, that's really important tonight is an acknowledgement that income matters. I have sat in this House for the last 6.5 years hearing how poverty's got nothing to do with money. It's all about individuals not pulling up their own bootstraps. It's all about the failure of the education system and teachers. It's all about people not grabbing opportunity. But anybody who has worked at the front line of the inequality in this country knows that income is critical, and they have been forced to give $25 more a week after 43 years. So I'm not the world's greatest mathematician, but anyone can tell that's not going to be enough after 43 years of governments failing to lift the benefit. But we're not going to look this tiny little gift pony in the mouth, because actually any money in the hands of families right now is good. They need it, but it's not a solution. So we would like to just acknowledge that it's not a solution, it's a tiny little step, and the solutions have to be much more structural and much more generous. If we can afford the nauseating tax cuts of several budgets ago for the wealthiest people, we could actually afford to extend the in-works tax credit to the families that really need it. So that would be a generous move. That would be a structural move, instead of which we've got giving on one hand and taking from the other. So on the one hand, there's this extra money. On the other hand, there's increased obligation. And increased obligation is always a euphemism for going down to work and income for another ritual of humiliation. Those of us who have worked as beneficiary advocates are under no illusions about that experience. It's worse for the people who actually have to do it, but we have witnessed it. And what we have seen is desperate families, including many solo parents, particularly women-led families, being told they are failures and that they will be sanctioned if they don't get work. And in this bill, they now have to have 20 hours a week. And no amount of description of the obligation as, oh, we'll be flexible about this, cuts any ice. We can sit in this House and use that language, but go down to work and income and witness what actually happens when families with no money are forced into social obligation. And let me talk about early childhood. The Green Party has demonstrated, just by reading the officials' briefing documents, that participation in early childhood is not sufficient. It's quality. But now we're going to make parents with a 3-year-old look for more work, while the children must be in early childhood of whatever quality. And until we commit to the family-centred models that my colleague talked about, like kohanga, like play centre, like kindergarten, who are losing families all the time, we are going to be putting kids into some good services and some utterly indifferent ones. And if we don't listen to the Brainwave Trust about what's important to the child in its first few years, if we won't listen to the child experts, if we won't listen to the Children's Commissioner, if we won't listen to Jonathan Boston, who said today, reading the bill, that actually the poverty measures, a number of them are failed by this bill, and that the $25 will not make a difference, if we won't listen to those people because we are so inside our privileged little bubble of what we've done a nice thing today, then we are failing the kids of this country. Kia ora tātou.
Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I rise to support the Support for Children in Hardship bill because something is better than nothing, Mr Speaker. But